What if I told you that the very thing you've been taught to fear, your own complete solitude, your raw, unfiltered thoughts, the parts of yourself you've hidden, even from your own awareness, what if that's exactly where your greatest power lies? Right now, as you listen to this, there's a voice inside you that's been silenced for so long, you've forgotten it exists. A voice that once knew exactly who you were before the world told you who you should be. If this resonates with you, if you're ready to discover the terrifying beauty of your own mind, then stay with me. And if you find value in this journey we're about to take together, please like this video and subscribe. It helps more seekers find their way to these ancient truths. You know that feeling, don't you? That hollow ache in your chest when you realize you've been performing your entire life, playing a role so convincingly that even you've forgotten where the mask ends and your true face begins. Nietzsche called this the herd mentality, the unconscious surrender of your individual will to the collective voice that whispers, be smaller, be safer, be what we expect. But what he understood, what Jung later echoed in his concept of the persona, is that this performance comes at a devastating cost. You've become addicted to external validation. Every decision you make passes through an invisible committee of voices, your parents, your teachers, society, even strangers whose opinions you'll never hear. You've outsourced your self-worth to people who don't even know the real you exists. And the real you? The one with wild dreams and uncomfortable truths? That self has been buried so deep beneath layers of conditioning that you experience it only in fleeting moments, perhaps in the quiet hours before dawn, or in the space between sleep and waking, when the world hasn't yet reminded you of who you're supposed to be. This is what Machiavelli understood about power. Most people give it away freely, unconsciously, believing that safety lies in conformity. But what they don't realize is that this trade authenticity for acceptance creates a psychological prison where you become both the guard and the prisoner. You feel it, don't you? That growing sense that you're living someone else's life. That the goals you're chasing, the relationships you're maintaining, even the dreams you're pursuing, they feel borrowed, secondhand, like clothes that don't quite fit. Jung called this the provisional life, the perpetual waiting for permission to be yourself. But here's what terrifies people about someone with true mental strength. They've stopped waiting for permission. They've realized that the very act of seeking approval is what keeps them trapped in mediocrity. The pain you feel isn't weakness. It's your authentic self knocking on the door of your consciousness, demanding to be acknowledged. But most people would rather numb this pain than face what it's trying to tell them, that they've become strangers to themselves. This is where your journey towards psychological freedom must begin, not in the comfortable lies you tell yourself about who you are, but in the uncomfortable truth of who you've been avoiding. From the moment you drew your first breath, the world began its patient work of shaping your mind. Not maliciously, but systematically like water carving stone, drop by drop, until the original form is unrecognizable. Your parents, meaning well, taught you that love was conditional. Be good, be quiet, be grateful, then you'll be worthy of affection. Your teachers rewarded compliance over curiosity. Society praised you for fitting in, not for standing out. And slowly, imperceptibly, you learned the most dangerous lesson of all, that your value comes from outside yourself. Nietzsche saw this clearly when he wrote about the slave morality, the psychological framework that teaches, used to derive our sense of worth from our ability to serve others' expectations. But what makes this conditioning so insidious is that it feels like virtue. You tell yourself you're being considerate, selfless, humble. You don't recognize that you're actually practicing a form of self-abandonment. Jung understood this as the development of the persona, the mask we wear to navigate social expectations. But here's what most people miss. The stronger your persona becomes, the weaker your connection to your authentic self grows. You become so skilled at being what others need that you forget what you actually want. This is how society creates what Machiavelli would call useful subjects. People so concerned with being liked that they never develop the inner authority to be respected. They mistake agreeableness for strength, when in reality, they've simply learned to anticipate and fulfill others' needs before their own. You see this everywhere now. People who can tell you exactly what everyone else thinks about any topic, but who fall silent when asked what they believe. Individuals who've become experts at reading rooms, but have never learned to read themselves. They've developed what we might call external intelligence, while their inner wisdom atrophies from neglect. The most tragic part isn't that you've been conditioned, it's that you've become unconsciously complicit in your own conditioning. You police your own thoughts before anyone else does. You edit your words before speaking them. You feel guilty for wanting things that don't align with others' expectations of you. This is what Nietzsche meant when he spoke of becoming all too human. So socialized that you've lost touch with your own animal instincts, your own primal knowing. You've been trained to distrust the very impulses that once guided you toward what you truly needed. But here's what people with unshakable mental strength understand. This conditioning isn't permanent. It's simply a layer of psychological sediment that's accumulated over time. And like any sediment, it can be cleared away, but only if you're willing to disturb the comfortable illusions that have kept you safe and small. The question isn't whether you've been conditioned, you have. The question is, are you ready to begin the terrifying, liberating work of unconditioning yourself? There comes a moment in every awakening when you must make a choice that will terrify everyone around you. You must withdraw. Not permanently, not with malice, but with the surgical precision of someone who finally understands the difference between solitude and loneliness. Nietzsche knew this when he wrote, "One must have chaos within oneself to give birth to a dancing star." But chaos, true chaos, can only be confronted in silence, in the space between your thoughts, in the absence of others' voices filling the void where your own voice should be. This withdrawal isn't depression or antisocial behavior. It's the most radical act of self-respect you can perform. Jung called it voluntary solitude, the conscious choice to step away from the collective noise so you can finally hear the whispered truths your soul has been trying to tell you for years. When you begin this withdrawal, people will be afraid. They'll call you selfish, antisocial, cold. They'll tell you that relationships are everything, that isolation is unhealthy, that you need to get back out there. But what they're really afraid of is what your withdrawal represents, the possibility that their own constant need for external validation might not be necessary after all. You see, most people are terrified of silence because silence reveals truth. In the absence of distraction, entertainment, and constant social feedback, you're forced to confront the person you actually are, not the person you pretend to be, not the person others need you to be, but the raw, unfiltered essence of your being. This is where Machiavelli's insights about power become profound. He understood that those who need others' approval are easily manipulated, while those who can sit comfortably with their own thoughts are essentially uncontrollable. Your withdrawal isn't about rejecting people. It's about reclaiming your internal locus of control. In this sacred solitude, you'll discover something that will change everything: your thoughts. When left undisturbed by others' opinions, naturally organize themselves around what you actually value. Your energy, when not constantly being given away to others' dramas and needs, accumulates into something potent and directed. You'll begin to notice how much mental energy you've been spending on managing others' emotions, anticipating their reactions, crafting your responses to maintain their comfort. And as you withdraw that energy back into yourself, something remarkable happens. You become self-sufficient in a way that makes others uncomfortable. This is the paradox of psychological strength. The less you need from others, the more valuable you become to them. But by then, your relationship to their need for you has completely transformed. You're no longer performing for approval. You're simply being yourself. And people either resonate with that authenticity or they don't. The withdrawal isn't about becoming a hermit. It's about developing such a strong relationship with your own mind that you never again feel compelled to abandon yourself for the comfort of others. You learn to enjoy your own company so much that being alone becomes a gift rather than a punishment. And when you do choose to engage with others, you do so from a place of fullness rather than emptiness, giving rather than seeking, contributing rather than consuming. In the crucible of your chosen solitude, something extraordinary begins to happen. What Jung called individuation, the process of becoming who you actually are, starts to unfold naturally, like a flower opening to sunlight after a long winter. This is where Nietzsche's concept of the Urmensch becomes deeply personal. Not a superhuman in the comic book sense, but someone who has transcended the need for external validation and learned to create values from their own authentic experience. You begin to realize that your mind, when properly cultivated, becomes an environment so rich and stimulating that you never feel bored or lonely again. You start to notice patterns you never saw before. How certain people drain your energy while others energize you. How some activities align with your natural rhythms while others feel like swimming against a current. How your intuition, that subtle inner voice you've been ignoring for years, actually has an uncanny accuracy about situations and people. This is what Machiavelli understood about true power. It comes not from controlling others, but from complete self-mastery. When you know exactly how your mind works, its patterns, its triggers, its sources of renewal, you become unmanipulable. People can't push your buttons because you've already identified and diffused them. Your energy becomes your most precious resource, and you begin to guard it like the treasure it is. You stop engaging in conversations that go nowhere. You stop attending events out of obligation. You stop maintaining relationships that exist only out of habit. This isn't cruelty, it's clarity. As you continue this inner work, you develop what we might call psychic sovereignty. Your mood no longer depends on others' approval. Your self-worth no longer fluctuates based on external circumstances. Your peace of mind becomes an internal weather system that you've learned to regulate. People begin to notice something different about you. There's a quality of presence, of groundedness, that makes them want to be around you. But paradoxically, you're no longer seeking their company in the desperate way you once did. This creates what Jung called psychological magnetism, the natural attraction others feel toward someone who is complete within themselves. You discover that your mind, when trained properly, becomes a source of endless fascination. You can spend hours in contemplation without boredom. You can solve problems that once seemed impossible. You can access states of creativity and insight that you never knew existed within you. This is the terrifying truth that most people avoid. You contain multitudes. Within your consciousness lies the capacity for profound joy, devastating honesty, creative genius, and spiritual transcendence. But accessing these states requires you to sit with the chaos, the uncertainty, the raw material of your unprocessed experience. What emerges from this alchemical process isn't arrogance or superiority. It's a quiet confidence that comes from having faced yourself completely and found something worth respecting. You've stopped running from your shadow and learned to integrate it. You've stopped projecting your unlived life onto others and begun living it yourself. This is what makes a mind truly strong, not the ability to dominate others, but the capacity to remain centered in your own truth, regardless of external pressures. And so you return to the world, but you return changed. Like Plato's prisoner emerging from the cave, you've seen something that can never be unseen, the possibility of living as your own authority, of drawing your sense of worth from the deep well of your own being, rather than the shallow puddles of others' opinions. This is what terrifies people about someone with genuine psychological strength. Not that they're aggressive or domineering, but that they're utterly self-possessed. They've found something within themselves that makes them immune to manipulation, coercion, and the subtle violence of social pressure. You walk differently now. There's a quality of presence that comes from having spent time in the depths of your own mind and found it good. You speak less, but when you do speak, your words carry weight because they come from a place of inner certainty rather than external approval seeking. People project all kinds of things onto this newfound strength. Some call it arrogance, not recognizing that true confidence has no need to prove itself. Others call it coldness, not understanding that what they're experiencing is the absence of their ability to emotionally manipulate you. Still others are drawn to it like moths to flame, sensing something they've lost and desperately want to reclaim. But you've learned something that Nietzsche spent his entire philosophical career trying to teach. The person who has conquered themselves has no need to conquer others. Your strength isn't about power over, it's about power within. It's about the unshakable knowledge that your worth isn't negotiable. Your truth isn't optional, and your peace of mind isn't dependent on external circumstances. This doesn't make you isolated or antisocial. If anything, you become more genuinely connected to others because you're no longer using relationships as a source of validation. You can love without possessing, give without expecting, engage without losing yourself. You've learned the difference between being alone and being lonely, between solitude and isolation, between independence and disconnection. Jung understood this as the goal of individuation, not to become separate from humanity, but to become truly individual within it, to contribute your unique gift rather than a diluted version of what everyone else is already doing, to be irreplaceably yourself in a world full of replaceable copies. The paradox is complete. By learning to need less from others, you become more valuable to them. By becoming comfortable with rejection, you become more attractive. By stopping the chase for approval, you naturally command respect. But perhaps the most beautiful part of this transformation is that you've stopped waiting for permission to be yourself. You've realized that the approval you were seeking was always yours to give. The love you were chasing was always yours to provide. The validation you were desperately needing was always yours to grant. So I leave you with this question, this invitation to the most important conversation you'll ever have, the one with yourself. What would you do? Who would you become? How would you live if you truly believed that your own approval was enough? What dreams have you deferred? What truths have you silenced? What parts of yourself have you abandoned in the hope that someone else would love what remained? The strongest mind is not the one that can dominate others. It's the one that has learned to honor itself so completely that external validation becomes irrelevant. That mind terrifies people, not because it's cruel, but because it's free. And freedom, true psychological freedom, is the most radical thing you can offer a world full of people who have forgotten what it feels like to be genuinely themselves. If this journey into psychological freedom resonated with you, there are others like you seeking the same path. Subscribe for more explorations into the depths of human consciousness. And remember, the strongest thing you can do is become irreplaceably yourself. But the journey doesn't end with your return to the world. In fact, this is where the most delicate and crucial work begins, learning to live as a guardian of your own inner temple, while remaining open to genuine connection and growth. You see, there's a shadow side to psychological strength that few speak about. The temptation to use your newfound self-possession as a weapon, to become so self-contained that you lose your capacity for genuine intimacy. Nietzsche himself fell into this trap at times, his brilliant insights sometimes curdling into a bitter superiority that isolated him from the very humanity he sought to elevate. Jung understood this danger when he wrote about the inflation that can come with individuation, the risk of becoming so identified with your own psychological insights that you lose empathy for those still struggling in the cave. The truly strong mind learns to hold both, complete self-sufficiency and genuine compassion for others' journeys. This is where Machiavelli's wisdom becomes most nuanced. True power isn't just about being unmanipulable. It's about being so secure in your own truth that you can afford to be vulnerable when it serves love, growth, or authentic connection. You learn to discern between healthy vulnerability and the old patterns of self-abandonment. Your relationships transform entirely. You stop being attracted to people who need you and start being drawn to people who choose you. You stop trying to save others from their own psychological work and start inspiring them by example. You become someone who can hold space for others' growth without losing yourself in their process. But perhaps most importantly, you develop what we might call compassionate boundaries. You can say no without guilt, yes without resentment, and maybe without anxiety. You understand that protecting your energy isn't selfish, it's how you ensure you have something valuable to offer the world. This doesn't mean you become rigid or unyielding. In fact, the opposite happens. When you're truly secure in your own center, you can be incredibly flexible in your responses to life. You can adapt without losing yourself, compromise without abandoning your values, engage with conflict without becoming consumed by it. You begin to see that your psychological freedom isn't just a personal achievement. It's a gift to everyone around you. When you stop needing others to be different than they are, you create space for them to discover who they might become. When you stop projecting your unlived potential onto others, you free them to explore their own. The most beautiful paradox emerges. By becoming utterly self-reliant, you become capable of true interdependence. By needing nothing from others, you can offer everything. By expecting nothing, you can receive everything with genuine gratitude. This is the final mastery learning to live from your authentic center while remaining genuinely available for connection, growth, and service. You've built a mind so strong that it no longer needs to prove its strength. You've found a peace so deep that it can accommodate any storm. You've discovered a love so complete that it begins with yourself and radiates outward without expectation of return. And in this state, you realize that the goal was never to terrify people with your strength. It was to inspire them to discover their own.